camera ran out of battery. 15 minutes, sorry, 15-minute record time. So just I'll probably do a better video, which might be written off. I've got quite a few pages written on why the PlayStation is the strongest system in the market and why the Xbox is dead and gone. I'd like to do probably a better video on that at some point, but I must admit I've just jumped on. I've first thing in the morning, bed hair, you know, still in my Jimmy Jams. Just wanted to try to get some education out there that and people really need to understand that Sony are in the strongest spot that they've ever been, and losing $20 billion in your share, in your equity, you know, in your value, because the market honestly believes that Xbox has a chance. Yeah, it has a chance, but there's going to have to be a lot of money put into it, and even then it's treading water for third place. You know, nothing's really going to beat what Unreal Engine will be pumping out on the PlayStation 5 side of the coin. The hardware itself was designed around the concept of pumping out, you know, what Unreal Engine, be it your Lumen, but some of the technologies there are really from the ground up to allow the consoles to arguably surpass what we're going to see in the PC space. And I do say surpass, even though knowing that the hardware itself, if we looked at the parts individually, they might not add up to anything special, but when we look at the system as a whole, there aren't PCs out there which can necessarily do what they do. And for the small percentage of people that have a PC that might have a throughput like the PlayStation 5's SSD can push through in direct injection into areas on, for example, the APU I think has a cache alignment which allows the GPU and the CPU to share shared data, which might allow some very clever tricks with physics or things that we just really haven't seen done previously. So things like the Tempest audio, all these things, there's no equivalent of in the market, and they will not come to PC. And in time, people are going to quickly realise that a PS5 where the developers optimise, because there's no scattering of the hardware base, there's no multiple SKUs to support, with drive and without drive, means developers can actually write software that will be to the metal and make use of all of the console power. And so we don't see that in the PC space, and we certainly don't see that in the Xbox space where there is such a range of consoles. So do Microsoft have a chance? Not really, but do they have a chance to spend a lot of money? Yes, that's their one strength. And if you want to think that Sony are weak in the market because Microsoft is spending a lot of money and demanding the competitor to respond, that is just mad. Now, some of the things that Microsoft really want Sony to respond to is Games Pass and games on PC. Now, I'd like to believe that Sony's investment in games on PC was the cleverest move that a company could make in a game of chess, because if you remember what I was saying about Games Pass having a strategy where they would ultimately move gamers from PC, if you've got gamers invested heavily on good PC hardware, that will not happen. And in a PC market, Microsoft doesn't get necessarily network costs because you don't have to be playing Microsoft games, first-party games, and you also don't really get licensed hardware sales. And Microsoft doesn't make any money for games sold that they don't own. So if Sony was to put some fertiliser in the PC world, i.e. throwing their games that they've already had use out of, made unit sales out of, to release them on PC, it ups PC rate. It ups the attachment rate of PCs, of people moving to PC as a gaming platform. It's actually a very, very clever move to do, because it possibly puts a little stopper in the notion that people might move from PC to an Xbox console. But I just do feel at the moment the market doesn't really understand these things that are at play, because we look at the industry based on what other industries do. And the console gaming market is a very different market. In fact, business came to it because it was profitable. But business strategies in it, look, it's gaming. You know, people want to be happy. People want, you know, how did Nintendo Wii outsell all the other consoles at the time? There's reasons. And these reasons don't, when the market is being manipulated through the media to suggest that one console's 2 teraflops more powerful and that multi-platform games will be better on it, or full RDNA 2 set is better, or that Games Pass model is for the win. These things, they don't help the developers. The developers, when they choose a console, they need to turn a profit, they need a return on investment, and I just can't see an Xbox ecosystem rewarding all the players involved, but it will hopefully one day be a turnaround for Microsoft where they can turn some profit in gaming. something that they have not seen for approaching a decade. You know, like it's been such a long time since Microsoft has had any real success in the console market, and it's because they don't understand the console market, and at the moment they are killing the console market, and it will become ultimately the quality of software in an Xbox ecosystem, whereas a developer, if you're on the Game Pass model where you just need to have your game released so that they can give it for free to all of their end users that are on the Game Pass model, the notion of ultimate quality is going to start to slip. It's going to become about quantity, and ultimately it'll be competing with iPads. You know, now I'm not to say that iOS gaming is a small platform. It's a huge platform, but that's a quantity platform. And you know, in terms of beating that quality, Games Pass would still do that for quite a long time. So a few years down the track, I think what we're going to be finding, if the current market plays out on the trajectory it's going for, is that Microsoft's very, very slow death in the console market will modify who it's actually competing with. But there's this crazy reactional state that the market's being in, and we all know that companies bounce back really quickly after these initial announcements are made. But the notion that everyone's going to try and press Sony as having a weakness at this moment, because everyone's trying to goad Sony to respond to the Games Pass model, which they really shouldn't do, or they lose overnight, because Sony's pockets aren't as deep as Microsoft being willing to take money from other wings of its business to keep just keeping gaming afloat, like gaming isn't turning any profit. Yeah, Microsoft really don't know what they're doing, but they know how to do a business war, and we don't see any response from that from the different culture, which is maybe let's just say the Sony and Nintendo ecosystem. It seems to be a lot more honourable in the way that they announce their specs or don't overpromise. There's certainly very, very big differences in how these things are pressed to the world, and when we, the end users, all champion the people that are the least anti-consumer, it's a very sad day. But I think we need to educate ourselves as to what is really going on, and when it comes down to Sony's current position, they are going to sell PS5s for the next decade. That's a given. Like, the console hardware is just incredible. It's superlative. You would be very hard pressed to beat it in a next Xbox console. If a revision Xbox Series X was to come to market with increased specs, which will likely happen. But I think Sony, after the Unreal Engine 5 announcement came out, realised that they don't need to create multiple SKUs. They don't need to create that market turbulence of we need to replace our own latest release console with another one. And they actually cancelled the notion of of a PS5 Pro, whereas we know for relatively quickly an Xbox Series S enhancement will come to the market, likely with bolstered clock speeds. Whenever you do a fabrication shrink, you can ramp up to faster speeds at the same power draw. So to generate more interest in the new Xbox Series S, it'll have a little bit more of a speed bump. It'll be another SKU for developers to have to write for. And based on the few tech channels, a couple of good tech channels that show benchmarking of games, sometimes in development, and it's very evident to see of the footage I've seen in the last 6 months that lead development platform on the Microsoft side of the coin is Xbox Series S. When we would hope it would be Xbox Series X, but of the attachment rate of those consoles, the Xbox Series S is about 2 to 1, I'm guessing, versus the Series X. It's so much so that it is the lead platform to optimise for, because it's 1/3 the teraflop power if you measure it just that way. Not a very real metric, because the CPU, the all-important CPU aspect is actually where it needs to be, and the console itself still has an SSD. So in a lot of ways, the Series S is the perfect, it's certainly better than a Nintendo Wii, and running Games Pass, it's a terrific little thing to put under a television. But yeah, I don't know what the attachment rate of software is in an environment where you get, on a rotating basis, all of the best software you could possibly ever want, including all of the big dogs, like your Starfields and your Elder Scrolls and your Forzas and your Halos. If Microsoft can't make money on their big wins, Anyway, Games Pass is probably not all it's cracked up to be, and I certainly wouldn't think that a big acquisition of a multi-platform, a lot of the Activision library is not... They're games that if at the end of the day, if Microsoft need to make money off any of these acquisitions, they kind of need to sell them where the hardware's being sold. So they're either going to go out of their way to rework these things to work on a Nintendo Switch, which isn't the most saleable way forward, A new Nintendo platform, if one was to come out, that would be, you know, a way to try and, you know, keep their software from hitting the PlayStation platform. But when you've got over 100 million PS4s in the market, you've got the PS5 at such a strong sell rate, as quick as they can make them, they're just gone, but anyone can say that in the present world state. The PS5 is where the attraction is, the interest is in the consoles, and we're about to enter the next 2-3 months is where a lot of the PS5 software that's going to show off a little bit what the console can do will start to come out. Now there has been things already, but you wait till some software is written to truly push the console. And we're talking here generally what's called second-gen software, where optimised code comes out that shows off what the console can do. And we're not going to see a lot of incredible stuff on the Xbox side of the coin regarding that. It'll certainly get tighter, but it will not be able to push forward so much past what we're currently seeing in the same way that the PS5 console will. And again, as a techie, as an engineer who understands the ins and outs of every single little chip I touch and spends a lot of time researching these things and in practical use as supported and used all these chips all my life, I can absolutely vouch that the Xbox console is nothing that special. Nightmare of an ecosystem to write software for, and then the actual corporate ecosystem of being supported and being loved by your fans and actually getting paid. There's so many steps as to why a lot of people would just rather probably go independent, but certainly find themselves releasing on a console where they will actually sell software. Definitely, that is the PlayStation ecosystem or the Nintendo ecosystem. And so this notion that Microsoft is somehow climbing up the ladder, no, they're just trying to stop themselves from falling off the back end in a way that they'll hopefully eventually turn profit. But the steps they need to do in order to turn profit with that are very unethical to end users. And certainly an acquisition like Activision, which is them just trying to tread water, it's not the strong play that some people have interpreted it as. There is no reason for Sony share prices to have dropped the way they have. That just shows that people don't really understand what's going on. But I do understand that if you were to look at the popular presses, you would certainly believe that the market is the way it is, but you really need to look at the three income streams that a console earns and how it earns it, and what's actually in front of Xbox is a massive uphill battle to break even or to eventually maybe one day turn a profit. And yeah, that's a kind of unhealthy ecosystem to be in, and I just find it amusing that personally an acquisition on software, and Activision's brilliant, and I can see how that looks like a strong play, and I can see how that might have bolstered Microsoft's share price or certainly hurt the opposition's. But the reality is it should have been the inverse, and I do look forward to when the market catches up with that. Now, obviously, it's all about, hopefully none of us are going to be hysterical about this. We do need to look at, we really need to look at how consoles exist. And sometimes if you look at the immediate past, you can make predictions about the future. But look, the PS3 was a hard console to write for. You couldn't do backwards compatibility with PS3 on PS4 because it was a lesser powered CPU. Backwards compatible PS4 on PS5 is super easy because it's the same architecture, the thing that Microsoft's had going for them all these generations. So Sony likely have wanted to do backwards compatibility. There's the Gakai acquisition a few years ago, which would have worked in their home territory because they had fast internet speeds, but across the globe it wouldn't have worked. So Sony's made a few missteps a long time ago in terms of trying to bring backwards compatibility or various things to market. Now, it's not an anti-consumer move when they don't. This generation around, they've got a CPU that's good enough to emulate the PS3 chip, so that would be a potential option. They've also got more games on the PS4 platform than all of the Xbox consoles combined for backwards compatibility. Yes, that's right, just having PS4 backwards compatibility, which are games written in the modern world at big budget for widescreen and support rumble features, they're all working. But Microsoft's backwards compatibility list is actually less than just what Sony has on the PS4, which says a lot about how many developers work in any given ecosystem and how much money Sony can actually make from selling a console, which Microsoft can't. But the notion that a lot of Xbox's backwards compatibility is